Welcome to the First Time Facilitator podcast. Whether you're a first-time facilitator or a seasoned pro, listen in for tips and tricks to make a bigger impact at the next workshop you deliver. And now, your host. She knows every lyric to that Bare Naked Ladies song 1 week, Leanne Hughes.
Hello and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Leanne Hughes, and I'm here to help you develop and deliver workshops that kill. Now, this show is proudly sponsored by my newsletter called The Flip Chart, where every month I share the cool facilitation and training tools, apps that I'm geeking out on, as well as other interesting things that I've discovered online. And you can sign up for The Flip Chart by visiting firsttimefacilitator.com and popping your details in the little pop-up window. Today's guest believes that who you know is more important than what you know. Do you agree? His name is Travis Chappell, and he's the founder and host of the Build Your Network brand and podcast of the same name. Travis and I met during the We Are podcast conference last year in Brisbane, and he has absolutely been killing it with his work. What's astounding about Travis is the way that he has been able to accelerate the relationships he has and the work that he does. I mean, he's had some real superstars on his show, including Jack Canfield, who was one of the authors of the Chicken Soup for the Soul series that I grew up reading quite a bit. And he's also recently interviewed the legendary John Maxwell, a business guru that you might have been exposed to in your work. One of the main reasons I invited Travis on the show is because he hosts some of the coolest retreats going around. So in the show notes for this episode, I'll put a link to one of the videos that was filmed on that retreat, his latest retreat in Thailand. It's just unreal. So yeah, he hosts these retreats in amazing locations around the world. Our mutual friend, Ronsley Vars, went to his retreat in Thailand and said it's just unreal that Travis did an amazing job organizing it, that Ronsley himself had some massive transformations from it and just met some incredible people. So in this episode, I asked him a lot about his Cool Places, Cool People retreat and what he did to make that a really magical event and to create deeper connections through that experience. If you've been listening in the last few weeks, you've also heard me promote a dice competition / collaboration. Have you ever rolled the dice at work? And I do mean that literally. Have you ever used dice in your work or at a meeting, in a conference as an activity? If so, I'd love to hear how you've used them, as I'm creating a bit of an amalgamation, a workbook of weird and wonderful ways that you can just whip out a dice in your workshop to do something, to create something, to make a decision. So to submit those, hop on to firsttimefacilitator.com/dice to share your game. And I look forward to hearing your activities. If you'd like to continue the conversation when the show is over, join our free Facebook group called The Flip Chart. There's some really awesome content that's being posted up on there, not from me, from all of the contributors and listeners and first-time facilitators around the world. So I encourage you to hop on and see what's on there. As always, you can view show notes for this episode at firsttimefacilitator.com/episode 67. Now, on to the show. I would like to welcome to the First Time Facilitator podcast, Travis Chappell, who's joining us all the way over in Las Vegas. Travis, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic, Leanne. How has everything been for you?
Yeah, really great. So Travis and I met each other at the We Are podcast conference back in October last year and got to hang out down the Gold Coast, which was awesome. And ever since seeing Travis deliver his Facebook workshop and speak in public, I've wanted to have him on the show. And what Travis really preaches is who you know is actually more important than what you know. And Travis, I've noticed on your podcast, Build Your Network, you have been talking to the who's who of business, finance, and fitness lately. Like, you've just been smashing it.
Thank you so much.
It's been amazing. I'm very jealous of some of your guests, which we'll talk about a bit later on. But I was wondering if you could share a bit of your backstory and what's really driven you to do what you're doing today.
Yeah, good question. And first of all, thank you so much for saying that. Yeah, it's always good to know that what you're doing is actually resonating with people instead of just like something that you like doing. But I want to thank you for that. But yeah, so my backstory is a little bit unique in the fact that I grew up in a really religious type of a background. And so for me growing up, there wasn't really any other option besides you're going into ministry. And that's just kind of how it was from the time that I was 11, 12 years old. And so I never really considered another career path. I never had that moment of like, well, what do I want to do with the rest of my life type thing. It was always kind of like decided for me. So when I was in college still, I always had the entrepreneurial itch. I was selling stuff to kids in my class when I was in second, third grade. You know what I mean? And then in high school, I started a landscaping business and different things like that. And then carrying that into college, a buddy of mine started doing door-to-door sales, and I saw a couple paychecks that he made, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. That it piqued my interest because I knew that he wasn't working more than 20 hours in a week. And so I was basically like, hey, can you hook me up with an interview for this door-to-door position? He said, yeah, for sure. So I got in touch with the supervisor, got hired that first week, and got started in door-to-door sales. And that was really what I did for all of my career up until the time that I started my podcast.
Wow. And so when did you start your podcast? It was a couple of years ago or?
Yeah, it was August of 2017. So it was like 2 months before the We Are podcast, the first one that I went to, where I was just an attendee.
Yeah, right. It's funny at that conference, people sort of walk in with being sort of amateur podcasters. And I mean, some of the guests that you've interviewed, you've had Aubrey Marcus on the show, you've had John Maxwell, which I think a lot of our listeners will know that guy. He is just such a guru in the business world. What I love about your story is that, yeah, you started in August 2017, but in about a year and a half, look at the caliber of guests that you're getting on your show. It just shows that people pivoting careers can really do this, and you don't have to take 5 to 10 years to sort of get to these kind of levels. What's really helped you get guests like this on your show?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's just, first of all, the mindset that it's possible to get good guests like that on your show. I think that's the most important thing before you go into like any of the other tactical, practical things. Because if you don't believe that you can do it, then it's not going to be possible for you. So it started with the belief, but then after that, more practically, there was a couple key people who I invested money into building relationships with, instead of just kind of hoping that I would eventually meet them one day and leaving it up to chance. I spent the time and the energy and the money to be able to make sure that those relationships happened. And then when I was there, figured out a way to really connect with those particular people. And they happened to be top people in the podcasting space, and they happened to be super well connected in the business space, not just the podcasting space. And so spending time with people like that and kind of learning from them, and then also having access to their network in a small sort of a way, was really beneficial from the get-go. So I would say look for opportunities for yourself to be able to connect with the people that you want to connect with and seize those opportunities. And even if it means that you need to pay for access, I think that is a way to jump into those conversations.
Yeah, I think what you're sort of saying there is that you've really accelerated the process of networking. So you could have easily spent, your 5 to 6 years getting to know different people and then slowly working your way up to the big people, but you've just gone,
yeah, totally.
Yeah, the pay to play. Love it. That's really great advice.
There's no right answer to that either, by the way. Like if you're somebody that you're just like, hey, 4 or 5 years, that's cool with me. I don't want to invest the money. I would rather put in the time. Hey, no worries at all. The only thing that I ask is that you adjust your expectations in terms of what you're going to get out of what you're putting into, because people have this idea that they're going to be able to have the same results that somebody like me has had, who has like invested tens of thousands of dollars into their network and into their relationships and learning and coaches and mentors and all those types of things. They think they can have the same results in the same amount of time without doing any of those things. And I think that's just a broken mindset to have, because you're just going to disappoint yourself and be frustrated with the process. But if you can sit there and be okay with it not taking 1 or 2 years, but taking 5 or 6 years, then it can happen for you too. It's just going to take you a lot longer period of time if you're not willing to put in as much time and as much money into investing into those relationships.
Yeah, it does seem like it's a constant trade-off, the time versus money stuff.
For sure.
Yeah. And actually, just a bit of a story, because when we were down the Gold Coast, I asked you how you got Amy Porterfield onto your podcast, and you actually showed me the conversation, and it was over months. It wasn't just you asked her and then you didn't hear back, so you stopped. You actually you followed up, and I find that very admirable. Is that a strategy that you continue to use to get these big guests on your show?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Anybody that has any demands on their time, you can't expect them to just drop everything and come on your show unless you're freaking like Larry King or, Joe Rogan. Like if you have just a ton of traction and millions of viewers and things, then anybody will drop anything at the, a drop of a dime to jump on your show whenever your schedule works. But if you're not in that position, then you got to understand that those people have a ton of demands on their time and they're not going to be able to just drop everything. And even responding to you is going to take a lot because they have 150 other DMs that they have to go through or 3,000 other emails that they have to read through, and their assistants going through each of their message inboxes. So people don't have any patience when it comes to that process, and they don't have enough people. So what I mean by that is like they'll start their podcast with the hopes of only getting Amy Porterfield on, and then when she says no, they don't know where to go from there. Like they just go back, like it's either Amy Porterfield or my cousin. You know what I mean? Like I'm either going to interview my cousin, my uncle, and like the guy that works at Cold Stone Creamery, or I'm going to interview Amy Porterfield. And when Amy Porterfield says no, it's like, okay, I guess I'm back to interviewing the Cold Stone guy or the cashier at Walmart. Like I'm back to interviewing those people instead of going for people like Amy Porterfield because she said no. So for me, it was like hey, I want Amy Porterfield on my show. But when she said no or ignored me, there was like a dozen or 24 other people that I was also trying to get on my show at the same time. And during those times when I would reach out the next time to Amy Porterfield, I wanted to be able to report something to her where she would be able to tell that, hey, this guy's not like all the other people that reach out. This guy's actually somebody worth connecting with. So during those times, I would reach out to other people and I'd get other people on my show, and I would have more and more traction in between each time that I'd reach out. I'd give her an update on what's happened in between the last reach out and this reach out, who's been on my show, what kind of credibility I've been able to bring to the table. And that ultimately is what enabled me to get in touch with her. That and my relationship with John Lee Dumas.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think it's true. It's like you've just got to keep, I don't like really using the word hustling, but what you sort of demonstrated through that example was that you are sort of quite relentless, and you also weren't taking it personally. And I think anyone in business who's even just putting out proposals to clients and not hearing anything, it can be quite personal and quite difficult to then do the follow-up. So a fantastic example. Now, you talked about investing, you talked about time and how a lot of us don't really have the time. So you've performed a bit of a miracle quite recently when you've hosted your Cool People, Cool Places retreat in Thailand, which a lot of people came to that. They weren't based in Thailand, so they had to get there, then take time away from their business. And I'm definitely linking to some of your videos in the show notes for this because I am so bummed I didn't make it. I'm really, Travis and I were going back and forth. I just had a few commitments in Brisbane, but man, I missed out. Can you tell us what inspired you to start the Cool People, Cool Places concept?
Yeah, it was almost like a selfish thing for me, Leanne, because I just like connecting with cool people and I like traveling to cool places. And I wanted to figure out a way to make money on that. Like, honestly, that's what it was.
Amazing.
And so I really enjoy travel. I'm 26 years old and I've been to 28 countries, I think now, and 34 of the 50 United States. So I like to travel. I like to get out. I like to see places, experience other cultures and different things like that. And so that's one thing that I really enjoy doing. And it's on my list every year. I try to visit at least a couple of new countries every single year or new states in the union every single year. And so when I wanted to put something together, I was just like, how can I travel and still get stuff done for what I do for a living instead of just having to like shut it off while I'm gone? So that was the way that I wanted to do it. And I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to go somewhere and host a destination retreat of sorts, then what kind of content am I going to have? Because I need to have speakers, I need to have content, I need to have a reason for people to come out. And then I just started thinking about like, why do I need that? It's only because of what other people have done that I think that I need that. And it's like a necessary aspect or the main selling point. And so instead of doing it that way, I was just like, you know what? What's fun for me is just having chill conversations with people over a beer when there's no agenda coming up. There's nothing that you got to go prepare for and get ready for. It's just a chill conversation with people who have a similar mindset to you, and doing that in a different country. There's just something about connecting with other people with the same mindset in a different country that makes that connection a little bit deeper because it gets you out of your routines. You're out of your normal You're kind of dazed from the full day of travel that it took from the States to Thailand. It's 20 hours of travel. And then it was like another 45 minutes to an hour taxi ride from the airport to the villa that we were staying at in Phuket. And so, when you get people out of their comfort zone like that and get them all together in one place and they all have the similar mindset, it just makes for some brilliant conversation. And so that was really how the name of the event came about, because I was just sitting there like, man, I just want to hang out with cool people and go to cool places. And so I just searched that domain on GoDaddy and found that coolpeoplecoolplaces.com wasn't taken yet. So I was like, oh, I'll book that domain name right now. And then I just kind of built out the event from there. And we did end up having speakers. We did end up having workshops and sessions, but we had 5 total over the course of 5 days. So it was the majority of it was like workshopping, hanging out, chilling, seeing Phuket, and just having a good time.
I love that, because a lot of the time when we do go to conferences, they're in these epic destinations, but you're inside 4 walls between like 8 and 6 p.m. And then you go to a bar and you don't get the chance to so I've been to Sydney, but I haven't actually stepped outside and seen, So what I love about that is that your agenda was quite loose. And I caught up with Ronsley Vars when he got back from the retreat, and he just could not stop going on about it, about the conversations that he had, about some of the insights that he got and the amazing people and the connection. And it wasn't even through his words. It was just like the energy that he spoke about that retreat was just incredible. So how did you create the space when you're bringing all these strangers in? And you said, because people are coming in, they must have a similar mindset. You're in this amazing Airbnb. How did you sort of, how did everyone break the ice? Did they sort of introduce each other when they got there? Was it formalized? What did you do in the intros?
Yeah, the first night wasn't really much of that. It was just like we had a dinner event and then everybody went to dinner and just kind of got to know each other and introduce themselves in more of a conversational type of a manner. But then the first morning when we got into some of the workshops and different things, I actually had everybody stand up and introduce themselves like that. And I gave them up to 10 minutes to do that. So I just said, if you have something to share, something that's on your mind, something that you feel is important or necessary to your introduction, feel free to share that. So some people would take like 45 seconds, and I had a couple people that took the full 10 minutes. But it enabled people to really share what's on their heart, what's on their minds, and kind of get to know each other better right off the bat. So that was kind of the agenda going from there. And then what happened was I knew that I wanted to do a day of hot seats, of just like all the other people at the event helping out all the other people at the event. And I was struggling on where to put it in the itinerary on the schedule, but I went ahead and decided to put it on the second to last day. And the results were amazing from that. And I think it was just because you'd given people a chance to connect all the surface level things throughout the first day or two, to the point to where by the time we got to the hot seats, they were super ready or already had developed some really deep connections with each other. And so by the time we did the hot seats, it was more like friends helping each other out because they could and were willing to go deeper on things. I talk about networking conversations a lot, Leanne, especially because of the nature of my show. And some people are just like, oh, I hate small talk. I just want to go deep with people and blah, 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 blah. And while I kind of shared that sentiment previously, I just think that it's part of the process. If somebody wants to talk to me on a deep level, but they haven't done any small talk with me, I don't feel that they've earned the right to ask me those kinds of deep questions, because they don't know me. They don't know anything about me. What they're trying to do is fulfill their own inner need of having deep conversation, instead of worrying about me and what my boundaries are and how I feel about things, and building a connection with me before trying to go deep and building a genuine relationship where it's a two-way street. It's all about them instead of about me, even though it seems counterintuitive, because you would think going deep with somebody means to care about them, but it's not really. It's just you're trying to satisfy your need to go deep with somebody. So you want to skip the small talk, and you want to skip the about me, and you want to skip all the surface level stuff and go deep immediately. But I don't think that you've earned the right to be able to go deep. So the first couple of days, we just kind of get to know each other. We hang out, we play a couple of games and different things like that, just to kind of get to know who each other are. And then by the time we do those hot seats the third day, we have the ability to go really deep. And then by the last day, nobody wanted to leave. Everybody just wanted to stay and hang out and hang out with each other. So, but yeah, it was a great time.
Oh, congratulations. And the format sounds perfect. And I completely agree. And what I do sort of notice at some workshops or conferences is that if the facilitator doesn't create that, icebreakers do get a bit of a bad rap, those sort of introduction questions that really, but what it does is it brings out that human nature in all of us, so we can start relating to each other, because this goes back to neuroscience. But when we meet strangers, if we can't relate to them, we actually see them as a threat. And so, of course, we're going to be defensive. Of course, we won't really open up. And the good thing about your retreat being 5 days, because that seems like a long period of time for anyone in the current era where it's just so busy. We've got all these things to respond to. I love that even in the first day, you gave everyone 10 minutes, which is a big chunk of time for someone to sort of stand up and share their story. So you were setting the scene right from the beginning by saying, hey, each of us individually, whether you're a speaker or someone that's flown in to be a part of this, we've all got equal time to share our stories, which I think is brilliant. I've got to ask a question though. How did you pick the Airbnb? Did you spend like forever on Airbnb just looking through all the amazing photos of places in Phuket?
That is exactly how I did it. It was way less of a science than it sounds, but for sure, that was basically what it was. Just looked up Phuket, looked up the number one thing I will say that I got great feedback on. If you're an event organizer, I think is pretty important. When you put everybody in one villa where like they by nature can't escape from each other, you have to give them some ability to be able to escape from each other if they want to be by themselves. So I didn't put everybody in one giant villa where everybody was sharing bedrooms and different things like that. Having everybody in one villa made for some great connections and great late night conversations because you don't have to travel back to the hotel or anything like that. And because there's no people from the outside being in on our event, if that makes sense. Like There's no like other tourists. Like if we just did it at a hotel and you're networking or hanging out or building a relationship with somebody and you're sitting at the hotel bar, you have the chance to somebody else to come in and like talk into that conversation. And not that that's bad, but in those types of situations, you really have the desire and the agenda to get everybody there to connect with each other. Not necessarily all the other people that are out and about in the community that could be distracting from the main core message of the event. So I think it was beneficial having it in one villa. But I think one thing that everybody really appreciated was the fact that they had their own bedroom and they had their own bathroom. So that was one thing I was intentional about when I was looking up on Airbnb, not just accounting for the proper amount of bedrooms, but accounting for the proper amount of bathrooms to make sure that everybody had their own place to escape to, their own place to like go to sleep, wake up, do their morning routine if they needed to, or go get some work done in the middle of the day and things like that. So, but yeah, it was basically just a bunch of scouring Airbnb and reaching out to a couple people, working prices and different things like that.
Yeah. And that's so much fun, isn't it? That whole planning. And I'm off to New York City in a few weeks and I just can't make a decision on hotels and experiences. It's all booking out though, so I need to make a decision quickly. And a really good point about separate bedrooms and bathrooms, because I think you're playing to then people that are extroverted, introverted, or people, like you just said, that need that time out from they might have had an awakening or they just need to reflect a bit more, and they can do that and it's okay. It's not like they're leaving.
Even Ronsley was sick for the first couple of
days.
I
heard.
So like had like a really bad fever and things like that. So, you know, like he would come out as much as he could and spend a little bit of time with people and be in on a couple of workshops and then basically just go back to his room and crank the AC and take a solid nap in the afternoon. Like if you don't have that separate space, it becomes difficult when, you know, wrenches like that are thrown in the works.
For sure. And how did you actually market this event?
It was all through my podcast. It was all just through my community, through my current base of people. It was all through like current channels. I didn't actually spend any money in marketing or advertising.
Cool. And I know that you've got a bit of a life change coming up, but have you organized a location for your next one?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the next one is actually going to be a little bit larger and it's going to be out here in Las Vegas. So it'll probably be less than 100 people, but it'll still be a little bit larger than obviously the one in Thailand that was 20 people, 23 people, I think. So this one will be more like a live event style, but it will also be setting the stage for the 2 destination events that I'm going to be throwing in 2020. So this year, this fall, October, November timeframe, there will be one out here in Vegas that will have more people at it. But then the 2 next year in 2020 will be the smaller events that are the destination retreats and things like that. So the next one will be out in Vegas, but it'll be a little bit bigger. And then the next 2 are TBD, but they will both be those smaller, intimate settings like it was this past time.
Nice. I'm sure you're starting some Airbnb boards based on your new favorite destinations. Yeah. Hey, so Travis, I've loved seeing you present as well. You seem to be very natural when you're up in front of a room and delivering, whether it's a workshop where you're training, that's okay, or delivering a keynote. What are some ways that you prepare for a presentation, whether it's like the week before or the month before, even the day of? What are some things that you do to prepare for that?
The number one way to counteract the lack of experience or any nerve buildup is over preparation, in my opinion. So I personally feel that if you can't deliver your speech without your slideshow presentation, then you're not prepared enough. That's what I personally believe. I don't think that you should be reliant or dependent on any piece of technology in order for your speech to go well. That's just kind of how I prepare for things. And I did learn a lesson out in Australia about putting too many words on the screen in my PowerPoint thing, because I'm not used to doing the PowerPoint thing, but most organizers like to see some sort of a PowerPoint. So I put one together and I ended up putting way too many words on the screen. And then I was skipping through some of it and people were wanting to know what I was talking about on the screen. And then it was just kind of like a next time. And when I delivered a version of that speech again, anyway, at the podcasting conference that I spoke at recently in Orlando, I chopped out probably 60% of the slides from that same presentation and delivered the same thing, but without having all the words up on the screen, because I think it distracts people from the core message of what you're trying to get across. It's like having subtitles on a movie.
Yeah.
If you put subtitles on a movie, you're too busy reading the words and not paying attention to what's happening in the movie. And it's kind of the same thing on a speech. So I'm more in the camp of like over prepare, and just know what your main points are. And you should be able to talk about that and be totally fine without having any sort of technology on your side. Technology is not dependable. You don't want to get up there and not have something work and then be totally reliant on what's coming on the screen. So I think that to counteract the lack of experience, you have to over prepare for things. And that over preparation is going to come in handy, especially if you're like really nervous coming to the situation. That over preparation is always going to help. I used to speak a lot, Leanne, when I was younger. I grew up in a super religious context, like I was saying earlier. So I was going to be a youth pastor. So I was doing like preaching and teaching like contests and stuff since I was 12 years old all the way up through my entire college life. And that was always the biggest thing for me then was I used to get super nervous. And I still do get nervous. I don't think the nerves will ever go away, but not as bad as I used to. And if you're a first time speaker out there, you probably know exactly what I mean by that. You get super nervous leading up to these things. And I figured it out right away that the more prepared I was, the less nervous that I was when I got up there, and the quicker I became unnervous once I was up on stage. So anytime I'm up on stage, there's a point where the nerves go away and I'm in my flow. And I know that once I get up there, it's going to be a certain amount of time from the time that I say the first word until the time where I feel totally comfortable and I'm in a flow state. And my goal is to mitigate that time and make it as small amount of time as possible, because I know the good stuff is always going to come while I'm in a flow state and not when I'm being nervous. So if I'm over prepared, if I know exactly what I'm going to say and my brain has already like checked that box off, meaning that like I don't have to worry about the fact that my notes aren't in front of me or that the slideshow is not working. I don't have to worry about what I'm going to say next. I know that my brain is going to pick up what I'm going to say next because I've practiced it so many times. That's when I know that I'm properly prepared to give a good presentation.
Yeah, I was actually wondering if you had experience speaking before, because I know that you started, again, the podcast a couple of years ago, because the way that you presented is very natural. So that's interesting to know that, yeah, since the age of 12 that you have been getting used to being in front of people. It is funny, though, when you start presenting and you've got certain people in the audience, you're like, oh, that can play on the nerves as well. Right. And I totally hear you about over-preparing. I recently did a podcast on the 12 rules for facilitation, and one of the rules that I talked about was assume that your technology will always fail.
So true.
Yeah. If you go in with that, then you just got to rely on yourself. You know, you've only got yourself to rely on. And I think that's a really good mindset to have. Do you sort of watch any other speakers and you get very impressed by what they do? Do you have any sort of role models when it comes to that space?
Yeah, definitely. There's quite a few speakers that I really just enjoy watching, and I enjoy watching them deliver and kind of captivate an audience. And a couple of them would probably be somebody like Ed Milet. I think that guy has an incredible energy, and then he's a great storyteller, and he just knows how to captivate an audience of people. I think another person would probably be Tim Story. He's a good motivational speaker and life coach based out of LA. He's also a pastor, but he's been a life coach and a motivational speaker to people like Robert Downey Jr. and a lot of other A-list celebrities. He's good friends with Oprah and different things like that. So the way that he captivates an audience and gets people to pay attention to what he's saying is really incredible. And then Eric Thomas is one of the best. He's always really good at capturing attention and getting people to be engaged and to care about what he's talking about. I find the art of storytelling storytelling really fascinating. And I think the better that you can get at that, the better that you're going to be at speaking. So anytime that I'm at an event, the content is the last thing that I'm worried about. Like the actual nuts and bolts, like the content is on the very last part of my list, because I know that every single speaker at that event puts out content somehow, somewhere, some way. So whatever they're teaching, I can learn from them somewhere. I don't need to learn exactly what they're teaching up on stage at this moment, even if it's a new speech that nobody's ever heard before and all the other bullcrap that you hear. The number one reason you should be going to events is for connection with other people. The number two reason that you should be going to events is to observe people who are masters at captivating audiences. Because if that's a skill set that you can master, then that's one of the highest paid skill sets you can have. You always want to go for skill sets that are higher paid. And the skill sets that are higher paid are the ones that not a lot of people have. And not a lot of people know how to captivate an entire audience and tell stories that actually mean something to people and hold people's attention and get real engagement from the audience. It's a skill set that is highly sought after and not super common. So if you can learn to master things like that, then you'll start seeing your paychecks get a little bit higher over time. And it's the same thing with anything else. That's why salespeople get paid a lot, because not everybody can sell. That's why marketers get paid a lot, because not everybody can market. So if you can go after the skill sets that not everybody has and you can master those, then I think that you're ahead of a lot of people. So first, go to events for the connection. Second, go to the events to learn how to speak. And then lastly, the content is at the very bottom of the list.
Lovely. I have never heard anyone be brave enough to say the content is at the bottom, but I agree with you. And also, Sean D'Souza would agree with that as well. I remember going to one of his workshops. It was like a 3-day workshop, and he said, "You're not here for the information. All the information that you want about this is online. You're here." Exactly. Yeah, there's all these other reasons why people go to conferences, and it's either, like you said, to accelerate it, to make the connections. But I've never heard of anyone also saying to observe people being able to captivate an audience. I remember when at that podcasting conference you and I were at, Pat Flynn and Dave Jackson towards the end of the second day, just the way that they sort of captured the audience, they moved the energy, it was incredible. I remember thinking that I'd really love to get to that level. So yeah, it's good. Great advice to, when you notice someone doing something well, think about what it is that they're doing that is working for them and how you can incorporate that yourself. Travis, what are you up to in the future? What's going on for you?
Yeah. Number one thing in personal life issues is that as of this recording, my wife is 4 days away from being due with our first child. So that's pretty crazy / exciting, nerve-wracking, and all those scary, all those things, right?
Yeah.
In terms of business, I have a course actually that I'm coming out with, a course in an online community all about how to network better, which I'm super excited about. I just filmed everything this past weekend for that. My podcast, my whole brand is called Build Your Network. So this course and community is going to be called Explode Your Network. It's basically everything that you need to know to explode your network in the next 12 months. So that's something that I'm really excited about. Filmed out everything this past weekend. It should be up and running here in the next couple of weeks. You can find more about that at travischappell.com/explode.
Perfect. And we'll pop those in the show notes. And geez, you're a busy man, but life is only going to get busier. And I can't wait to follow your progress and Jackie's progress and meet the new family on Facebook Live. I'm sure you'll be posting a bit on there.
Definitely.
Travis, thank you so much for your time today and for your perspective on creating cool events, and just to give people a bit of a jolt and say that it is about your mindset. And if you don't think that you can do certain things or talk to certain people, it's all about really addressing that before you get onto the tactical stuff. I think that was a big takeaway for me from this conversation. But also nice to hear that I'm not the only one that gets lost on Airbnb, and I think we need a timer when we open that up. So thanks again, Travis. It's been great having you on the show.
Yeah, of course, Leanne. Thank you so much for allowing me to share with your audience. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Have a good one.
You too.
Hey, thanks so much for sticking around. You've reached the end of another episode of the First Time Facilitator podcast. Connect with the show at firsttimefacilitator.com. or follow me on Instagram at Leanne Hughes to find out what I'm up to during the week. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to share it with someone who will also appreciate the insight, and make it easier for yourself and subscribe to the show in your podcast player of choice. Thank you so much for listening, and chat to you next week.